After the respiratory system, we have the nervous system, which consists of the brain, spinal cord, sensory organs, and all of the nerves that connect these organs with the rest of the body. The central nervous system evaluates information and makes decisions, while the peripheral nervous system, or the PNS, monitors the conditions inside and outside of the body and sends this information to the CNS. The nervous system is composed of the CNS plus the PNS. The consists of the brain plus the spinal cord, while the PNS consists of the sensory nerves plus the sense organs. The first part of the CNS is the brain. It weighs about 3 pounds and is located inside the cranial cavity. It is protected by the skull, cerebrospinal fluid, and the meninges membrane. It is the seat of higher mental functions, such as consciousness, memory, planning, and voluntary actions, as well as lower body functions such as maintenance of respiration, heart rate, blood pressure, and digestion. Basically, lower mental functions are those with which we are born, and they're the natural functions and are genetically determined, while higher mental functions are acquired and developed through social interactions, and both these types of mental functions are controlled by the brain. After the brain, we have the spinal cord, which is a long, thin mass of bundled neurons that carries information through the vertebral cavity of the spine. The spinal cord begins at the medulla oblongata of the brain and continues until the end of the lumbar region of the spine. So it begins at the medulla oblongata of the brain and ends at the lumbar region of the spine. We need to know that the white matter of the spinal cord acts as the main conduit of nerve signals to the body from the brain. So it is the main channel or the main route of nervous signals to the body from the brain, while the gray matter is responsible for integrating reflexes to stimuli. After the CNS, we have the peripheral nervous system. They are bundles of axons called nerves that act as information highways between the brain and spinal cord and the rest of the body. We need to know the difference between afferent and efferent nerves. Afferent nerves are those that carry information from the receptors, such as those in the skin, towards the CNS, while efferent nerves carry signals from the CNS to effectors such as muscles and glands. Mixed nerves are those that involve both afferent nerves that head towards the CNS and efferent nerves that head away from the CNS. Now, as we mentioned in the previous lab, we have different types of nerves. First of all, we have cranial nerves, the ones in the brain, and then we have 31 pairs. First of all, we have cranial nerves, the ones in the brain. They extend from the inferior side of the brain, and we have 12 pairs of cranial nerves in total, so 24 cranial nerves in total. Then we have the spinal nerves, which extend from the left and right sides of the spinal cord, and we have 31 pairs. If you remember from the last lab, they're named according to where they leave the spinal cord. If they leave from the cervical region, they're called cervical nerves. If they leave from the thoracic region, they're called thoracic nerves. If they leave from the lumbar region, they're called lumbar nerves. And if they leave from the sacral region, they're called sacral nerves. And finally, we have one pair in the coccygeal region. So that's basically all we need to know about the nervous system. After the nervous system, we have the skeletal system. It includes all the bones and the joints in the body. Each bone is a complex living organ that is made up of many cells, protein, fibers, and minerals. We need to know that the skeleton acts as a scaffold. By scaffold, we mean a support system that provides support and protection and provides attachment points for the skeletal muscles that allow voluntary movement. The red bone marrow produces new cells. If you remember from the last lab or the lab before the last, we said that yellow bone marrow was adipose tissue in the bone marrow. We called it yellow bone marrow. We need to know that bones act as the body's warehouse for calcium, iron, and energy, and that the skeleton grows throughout childhood. The adult skeletal system is made up of 206 individual bones. 80 of those bones are found in the axial system, which runs along the body's midline. So the axial system consists of the skull, the hyoid, which is the tongue bone, auditory ossicles, which are the 3 bones found in the ear, the ribs, the sternum, which is the breastbone, and the vertebral column. 126 bones are found in the appendicular system, which consists of the upper limb, the lower limbs, the pelvic girdle, and the pectoral or shoulder girdle. That's all we need to know about the skeletal system. After the skeletal system, we have the urinary system. The urinary system has two main functions. It filters and eliminates waste from the body, and it maintains homeostasis of water, not warts, of water, ions, pH, blood pressure, calcium, and red blood cells. It consists of the kidneys, ureters, urinary bladder, and urethra. The kidneys filter the blood to remove wastes and produce urine, and the urinary tract, which is the ureters, plus the urinary bladder, plus the urethra, drain urine from the kidneys, store it, and then release it during urination. So the ureters drain the urine from the kidneys, the bladder stores the urine, and the urethra releases it during urination. First of all, the kidneys. The kidneys are a pair of bean-shaped organs. As we discussed in class, the left kidney is located slightly higher than the right kidney because the right side of the liver is much larger than the left side of the liver. The function of the kidneys is to filter metabolic waste, excess ions, and chemicals from blood to form urine. After the production of urine in the kidneys, they're drained inside the ureters. The ureters are a pair of tubes that carry urine from the kidneys to the urinary bladder. The thing that prevents the urine from going back up the ureters are valves. Valves prevent urine from flowing back into the kidneys. After the urine is drained from the kidneys, they are stored in the urinary bladder. The urinary bladder is a sac-like hollow organ used for the storage of urine. The walls of the bladder, which if you remember from the Lab 11, is made of transitional epithelial tissue, allows it to stretch to hold between 600 to 800 ml of urine. Finally, we have the urethra, which releases the urine from the bladder, is the tube through which urine passes from the bladder to the exterior of the body. We have to know that the male urethra ends inferior or under the clitoris, while the male urethra ends at the tip of the penis, and that part of the urethra is called the external urethral orifice in males. We need to know that in males, the urethra carries two things: urine as part of the urinary system, and semen as a part of the reproductive system. After the urinary system, we have the sense organs. First of all, we need to know the definition of a sense. The definition of a sense is two-part. First of all, a sense is a system that consists of a group of sensory cell types that responds to a specific physical phenomenon. For example, in the eye, there are a group of sensory cell types that respond only to the physical phenomenon of light. And the second part of the definition is it corresponds to a particular group of regions in the brain where the signals are received and interpreted. In addition to the five senses, which are sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing, we also have awareness of pressure, of temperature, which is thermoception, of pain, which is nociception, of vibration, which is mechanoreception, internal stimuli via chemoreception, and balance, which is equilibrioception. Now, our sense of balance is maintained by a complex interaction of four things: of visual input, or our vision, of proprioceptive receptors that are affected by gravity and stretch sensors found in the muscles, skin, and joints, the inner ear vestibular system, and the central nervous system. These four parts all contribute or all maintain our sense of balance. If any one of these parts, or of these four parts, experiences any disturbances, we will experience dizziness and unsteadiness, which is a lack of balance. And this lack of balance is caused by disturbances in any part of the balance system. Now, after discussing balance, we're going to discuss the eye. As we can see here, the eye is the organ of vision. It has three coats enclosing three transparent structures. First of all, we have the outer layer, which consists of the cornea and sclera, and the middle layer, which consists of the iris, ciliary body, and choroid, and the inner layer, which consists of the retina. First of all, the outer layer consists of the cornea, which is this part here. The cornea is a transparent, circular part of the front of the human eyeball. It refracts light entering through the pupil and onto a transparent lens that focuses. So it refracts the light through the pupil onto a transparent lens, and this transparent lens focuses light onto the retina. That's the function of the cornea. The manual doesn't discuss anything about the sclera, so I'm not going to mention it here. The middle layer of the eye consists of the choroid, the ciliary body, and the iris. The choroid is the layer of the eyeball located between the retina and the sclera. As we can see, the sclera is this part and the retina is this part. So the choroid is the part between the sclera and the retina. It is a thin and highly vascular, meaning it contains many blood vessels, highly vascular membrane that is dark brown. Its function is to absorb excess light and prevent blurred vision. The next part of the middle layer is the ciliary body. Its function is to alter the curvature of the lens. So this ciliary body here changes the curvature of the lens, and this process is known as accommodation. So accommodation is the process by which the ciliary body changes or alters the curvature of the lens. The iris, which is this part here, is the colored part of the human eye. So the iris is the colored part of the human eye. It is a thin contractile curtain found in the aqueous humor that is anterior to the lens, meaning that it's behind the lens, or excuse me, it's in front of the lens, but behind the cornea. So the iris is anterior to the lens, meaning that it's in front of the lens, but it's behind the cornea. We need to know that it is found in the aqueous humor, which this part here is the aqueous humor, and it contains a circular aperture, which is this part here, a circular aperture called the pupil, and this pupil here allows light to pass into the eye. The size of the pupil is regulated by the pupillary or the light reflex, which is not labeled here on this diagram. So the final layer of the eye is the retina. It's the innermost layer, which is this part here. It is a light-sensitive structure lining the interior of the eye. Another word for light-sensitive is photosensitive. So the retina is light-sensitive or photosensitive because it contains photosensitive cells called rods and cones. The cones are sensitive to color and located in the fovea. The fovea is a part of the retina. We need to know that the cones are both sensitive to color and light. In contrast, the rods are not sensitive to color, but they have a much greater sensitivity to light. They are also located in the retina, but they're located around the fovea. The cones are located in the fovea, the rods are located around the fovea, and they're responsible for peripheral vision, which is when you're able to see from the corners of your eyes, and night vision, which is when you're able to see at night. The reason, for example, why some animals have better night vision than humans is because they have more cones in their eyes. The optic nerve, which is this part here, connects the eye to the brain. This point of connection between the brain and the eye is called the blind spot because it is insensitive to light because there are no cones and rods in this area. We need to know that the optic nerve progresses from the posterior or the end or the behind the eyeball into the skull through the optic chiasmata and then onto the cortex of the occipital lobe on each side of the brain. We need to know about the gel-like substance in our eye, and the gel-like substance in our eye is known as the aqueous humor. It fills the anterior chamber of our eye, so this part of the eye, which is located immediately behind the cornea and in front of the lens, is known as the anterior chamber of the eye. We also need to know that it fills the posterior chamber of the eye, which is the very narrow compartment located between the peripheral part of the iris, the suspensory ligament of the lens, and the ciliary processes. So this part is these parts here are the posterior chambers of the eye, and this one is the anterior chamber. And both of these are filled with the aqueous humor. In contrast, or as we can see, aqueous humor only accounts for a small part of the eye. The major or most of the eye, the majority of the eye is filled with vitreous humor or the vitreous body. Vitreous humor or the vitreous body is located in a large area that occupies 80% of the eye. It's a transparent, thin, jelly-like substance that fills the chamber posterior or behind the lens of the eye, we need to know that the membrane enclosing the vitreous humor is known as the hyaloid membrane. And this is everything we need to know about the eye. Next, we have the ear. The ear is basically it's a part of the auditory system, and it is the organ that detects sound. It in addition to detecting sound, it also aids in balance and body position. It has three portions: the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. The outer ear is the fleshy, visible outer ear. So this part here is the outer ear. It's also known as the pinna or the auricle. So the auricle or the pinna is the fleshy, visible outer ear. As you can see, it's shaped like a cup, and its function is to direct sound from outside of the ear through the ear canal until it hits the tympanic membrane, which is also known as the eardrum. So this tympanic membrane is known as the eardrum. So the function of this outer ear is to direct sound through the ear canal or the auditory canal, so it can hit the tympanic membrane or the eardrum. In the ear canal, we have earwax, which is also scientifically known as cerumen, and hair, and the function of the earwax and the hair is to filter the air entering the ear. After the outer ear, we have the middle ear, which consists of the three auditory ossicles. So the air-filled cavity behind the tympanic membrane, this part here, is known as the middle ear. We need to know that it connects to the upper throat or the upper pharynx via the eustachian tube. So this part here takes us to the upper pharynx, and it's a part of the middle ear. It includes three bones or ossicles. We have the malleus, which is also known as the hammer here. We have the incus, which is also known as the anvil, and the stapes, which is also known as the stirrup. These three ossicles transmit sound from the tympanic membrane or the eardrum to the secondary tympanic membrane and amplify sound by almost 30-fold. There are two windows between the middle ear and the inner ear. These windows are the oval window, this part here, which contains the secondary tympanic membrane. So sound is transmitted from the tympanic membrane to the secondary tympanic membrane in the oval window. When the stapes footplate pushes on the oval window, it causes movement of fluid within the cochlea, which is part of the inner ear. And the second window in the middle ear is the round window. Also, we need to know, as the stapes footplate pushes against the tympanic membrane in the inner ear, this window is also pushed and allows fluid to move in the inner ear. So basically, the outer ear consists of the pinna, ear and ear canal, and tympanic membrane, which is the eardrum. The middle ear consists of the three ossicles as well as the round and oval windows. And finally, we have the inner ear, and we need to know that it is anatomically split into two parts, the bony labyrinth and the membranous labyrinth. It contains the sensory organs for balance and motion, and the sensory organs for balance and motion are the vestibules, which are the utricle and saccule, and the semicircular canals, which are labeled here. So these two are responsible for balance and motion. However, the part of the ear which is responsible for hearing is the cochlea right here, which is a part of the inner ear. We need to know that the cochlea consists of three fluid-filled spaces, which are the scala tympani, the scala vestibuli, and the scala media.